I was at that meeting and heard you when you talked about the mines, and I did nothing. My son was out in the woods around there trying to collect wood to cook, and he stepped on a mine and he lost his leg. If I had spoken sooner, that would not have happened. So I'm here to try to help you however I can.
This is Silent Killers, a podcast from Face to Face and the international campaign to ban landmines. In 1997, the world said enough and signed the Mine Ban Treaty, but landmines are still claiming lives in many countries around the world. In this series, we meet survivors, frontline workers, and global changemakers, all fighting for a mine-free world. From Cambodia to the Ukraine, the danger is real. The work is urgent, and the path to peace is possible. Step by step, and yet still under our feet. This is Silent Killers. Well, welcome to Silent Killers, Inside the Movement to Ban Landmines. It's a new podcast, and it is a podcast in partnership between Face to Face and a podcast that's been going for about 12 years. You can find it online, well over 600 interviews with some pretty interesting people along the way. And we've partnered with the International Campaign to Ban Landmines. That's ICBL, for those of you who are in the know. And this conversation might be a little acronym-laden. I'm going to say that out loud. And before we step in, we have Jody Williams here to chat about her life. And you've heard a little bit about her. Jody, thanks so much for joining us here on this show. And I have to say, I don't think I've ever had a conversation with a Nobel Prize winner before. So welcome to Silent Killers.
Thank you for having me. You're easy to talk to.
Well, thanks. So, Jody, a lifetime of activism. I've been doing some research on you, of course, in preparation for the interview. I mean, you are a hard woman to sort of keep track of, in a sense. Like, you've been involved in so many things. I mean, how do you describe yourself? Are you an activist? Are you an academic? Like, if you had one, what would be at the top of your business card?
Oh, activist, without question. The academic stuff was incidental.
Just sort of happened along the way?
And it only happened because I had the Nobel Peace Prize. And they wanted somebody with the Nobel Peace Prize to be teaching at their school.
Somebody with a reputation. So can you talk to me a little bit about that pull towards pushing back, that pull towards saying, you know, there's something not right with what's happening in our world, and I need to protest about that. I need to change the way things are being perceived. I mean, this goes all the way back to the Vietnam War for you, if I understand correctly.
That's true. But there's even a more personal element. My oldest brother was born deaf in 1947, which is when they were still teaching in the silent world for the deaf, you know, trying to push them into speaking. When you can't hear, how do you push somebody into speaking? Anyway, and we lived next door to Billy and Bobby in Vermont, brothers. And they got off on making fun of my brother. So I tried to beat them up. I think they were 14 and 15. I was 5, maybe, or 6. That didn't work. They ran faster than I did. But it made me very sensitive to people being mocked just because they are the way they are. And then in grade school, in 4th grade, and this reflects back on my brother Steve, I think, why I cared enough to try to help this kid. We were out for recess, you know, kickball. The game, whatever, you kick the ball, try to hit somebody on the other team. And
okay.
Yeah.
Sounds pretty nonviolent to me, Jody.
And the stud of the 4th grade was David Cheever. And David was the best in everything, every sport.
Right.
Good grades, all that. And then that year we had a new guy, Michael Fine, who was your quintessential geek, isn't even the proper word. Doesn't define enough how weird he was. And he couldn't play kickball. He couldn't even kick a ball. You know?
Right.
David always was a team leader, and he certainly didn't pick Michael Fine. And then when the game started and Michael was so bad, he told him to get out of the game, go away. And I was afraid of authority when I was little. And I just stood there and I was really quite stunned.
Sure.
And I got so agitated, I went up to him in the middle of the circle and said, you can't do that. You don't have the right to throw Michael out just because he sucks, although I doubt I said sucks in 4th grade.
Right, sure.
So shockingly, he went and invited Michael back into the game.
Wow, that's amazing. I'm getting goosebumps here on this, Jody. Seriously.
What it made me really realize is if nobody speaks up, and we were 20 kids or something in fourth grade, and here's 20 kids at first standing there silently and letting Studley David be a bully to another kid. I was shaking inside, but I went up to him and confronted him, and it worked. And then that has always stuck with me. If people have the moral courage to stand up and, confront people who are being mean, and we can define mean very broadly,
Sure.
change can happen in the positive sense. And, I think that's the real beginning. And then when I was a sophomore in high school, and we had a teacher for the 1 year while the social studies teacher was on sabbatical or something. And he was young. He wore a dashiki. I didn't even know what that thing was until he was there. And he started questioning about the US, its history, its interventions, that kind of thing. And it just flipped something in my head about the country and the myth. And I believe every country creates mythologies and, of course, focuses on the really good ones. Like the US has never focused on the fact that it wasn't just westward ho, it was genocide to steal the land.
Mm.
And that was like a slap in the face for me, like, whoa. And it just started me thinking a lot more about that kind of thing.
Jody, did you grow up in that kind of environment? I mean, grade 4, to have that realization that something wasn't right here. I mean, it makes you wonder, right? Is that sort of built in with us? Is it nature, nurture? Is it a bit of both? These are big questions, but I'm fascinated by that. Like you said, you were shaking inside, but you still did it. You still committed. And even after the commitment, you took the step and the plunge. Like, that's incredible to me.
Shocks me too. I truly was afraid of authority. I would be at grade school before the door was unlocked because I didn't want to get a tardy mark on my report.
Right.
My parents used to laugh and say, why don't you get the janitor to give you the keys and you can open it and he can sleep in?
That's amazing. Yeah, that's very funny. But from a very young age, what a paradox to your life too. And anyone who's listening in who doesn't know a little bit more about Jody, like me, I've just started to learn. You're going to have to dig deeper. You heard it a little bit in the bio, but I've heard from Good Report that Jody's memoir, My Name is Jody Williams, is quite funny. So you might want to look into picking up a copy of that. Jody,
I went from being afraid of authority to grabbing a U.S. colonel by the throat and telling him to F off.
Well, you know what? Having just met you today, how come that doesn't surprise me?
Yeah, we were at a reception after a day of landmine debates, and he was trying to convince me that American landmines were really good. And so he said, come on, Jody, we're both Americans and, we can work together on this, and it went from there.
Well, I think the world's a better place because you pushed back against, what was his name again?
David Cheever.
I'm amazed that you have those details ready to hand. That's just remarkable.
I probably had a crush on him, let's be real.
Let's be honest.
He was cute. He was smart. He was athletic, but
that's very funny. Well, I do love, though, that you kind of, I don't know, you heard the call. How corny is that? But really, it was kind of seed was planted, whether it was your parents or your upbringing. I'm sure it was that, but it was also other things as well. And I think, there's that span of time in between there and your sophomore year. I'd love to hear more about that. I'm sure it's in your memoir and so on. But our lives are just a box of puzzle pieces, really, aren't they? And
absolutely. And it's strange how
we get from here to there, and I'm always amazed. So, well, listen, thanks for sharing that. I mean, I really appreciate your candor and your sense of humor, but I do love the fact that you've been committed to this for so many years. Can you tell me a little bit about, before we start talking maybe more about the issues around disarmament, around landmines and so on, because really that's why we're here today. How did the ICBL get rolling? I've heard in a few places and from a few people that it was an office or a staff of one, and I'm pretty sure we're chatting together right now. Talk to me a little bit about some of those challenges and wins.
As I told you, my first protest was against the war in Vietnam. I graduated from university wanting to be everything and nothing, and didn't have any clear career path. But ultimately, not all that long later, I ended up working on issues related to Central America during the Reagan and Al Haig years when Al was drawing the line against communism in Central America. And did that for 11 years, which shocks me when I think of how long it was. And it was trying to stop U.S. military intervention, or at least mitigate the, effects. And at the end of the 11 years, I was asked to come to a meeting in Washington where I was living at the time. And it was a guy from Germany who ran the Medico International. His name was Thomas. I knew him because he was working with the prosthetics program of medical aid for El Salvador that I was then
right.
doing prosthetics for, not him personally, but the program. And he was actually tricking me into going to the Vietnam Veterans of America Foundation office in DC, where he and Bobby Mueller, the head of it, started talking about landmines. And, I'm just sitting there thinking, what the hell are they talking about this for? Why not nukes? This was right after the wall fell and all that.
Right.
I thought nukes,
Yeah, there are better things to be concerned about.
And then Mueller started talking about the impact of landmines. They can stay in the ground forever. You could bury a landmine, if you're a soldier or whatever, and blow up your grandson, for example. And they last forever, et cetera, et cetera. And, something went off in my brain, like, yeah, he's got something to say about this. So they said, we want to ban landmines. You want to create a campaign. And I thought about it for a minute, and I was sick to death of Central America after 11 years. And they were doing peace deals by then, and they were not that great, but at least they were trying. So I said yes. And I started the campaign to ban landmines. And I could call it the international campaign because we had the vets in America and Gebauer and Medico International in Germany. And we grew from that to 1,300 NGOs in about 90 countries around the world.
It's remarkable. And I want to ask you about that, how you managed to galvanize such support in a pretty short period of time. I've worked in the NGO sector for years, and it can be a challenge.
To put it mildly.
Yeah, capital C, right? All the way. And just sometimes one of the things I do know about the nonprofit sector is they're great at booking more meetings. That's
Yep.
Yeah. And I mean, you got to get people on the same page. There's no question. But what I love about your story here is, I mean, I guess the question I have for you is, if that conversation hadn't taken place, would you still be where you are today? Would you have gone down the ICBL route? Would it have been landmines, or is that a question you could answer even?
I don't know. I might guess I would because of my history, starting with, trying to save my brother. But I don't know. I doubt I would have picked landmines.
It would have been something.
It might have been nukes.
It might have been something else. Yeah. Isn't that fascinating? That idea that this time and place, your research, the work that you've done, you were tired of working, etc. I just, again, how the ripple grows to me is remarkable. And honestly, when we're talking about ripple here, Jody, I think it's far wide and pretty deep from what I understand. Loving where all this is heading. How did you get so much support so quickly?
I got off my butt and I went to meet them where they were at. We didn't have email then. I had thermal paper faxes. And
right.
you know those if you didn't put them
I'm old enough to remember what those were. I could feel the paper in my hands.
The message would fade, though, if you didn't.
It would over time. It'd go a little yellow, right?
Oh, yeah. Horrible. But I started believing in the invincibility, if you will, and the absolute need for coalition work to bring about big change, right? And you start thinking, okay, what kind of people and organizations are involved in getting rid of landmines? There's the political side trying to make a treaty, of course, and there's the physical work of removing landmines. So I went and met with organizations that were mine clearance organizations and talked about the campaign and just said, we're trying to expand it. Take a look. If it meets your goals and it interests you, you can join. I went to a big meeting in Germany and sat through a 2-hour meeting where they all spoke in German with no translation, which I thought was phenomenal. I happened to be there for a landmine meeting after they were done. So what was I going to do? Complain? But I thought it was incredibly rude. But anyway, there were organizations from all over Europe that had come for this meeting about weapons and blah, blah, blah. And I gave the rap and we talked about different aspects of trying to, do you have a plan here? And it just grew and and the faster it grew, the more it grew. So that within, I think 3 years, maybe, we were up to about 75 or 80 NGOs in the...
And this is still before the Ottawa Treaty, of course.
Yep. And that was fast. That was really fast.
So, Jody, is it fair to say, it took a lot of passion and commitment and follow through? I would imagine an awful lot of conversations. Like you said, this was the era of faxes, no emails, a lot of phone calls, a lot of meetings, I would think. Were there any particular strategies you used, like anything really focused that organizations today could pick up on from an activist perspective? Anything that strikes you as super important?
There's so many little elements to building a campaign like that.
Of course.
One thing that we did is there was a steering committee eventually, and we would discuss 6-month plans of action, measurable, so you could see if you were getting anywhere. And we also, every year or every 2 years, we would have a global meeting.
Okay.
Because I believe you have to know each other. You have to care, even if it's caring enough to want to slap one of them because he's too macho and thinks you should step aside because you're a girl. But you have to know each other. And when we did the 6-month draft plan, there were no directives. Like, we're doing this and you have to do this. And if you don't, you're out of the campaign kind of thing. It was every campaign, whether they were in Cambodia or the US or Norway or whatever, could choose or not to participate in the key activity of that period. And they could decide for themselves how they were going to do it. We, for example, tell a bunch of Cambodians what to say to the king. People were responsible for sending me information about what happened so I could do a newsletter and send it to everybody. But beyond that, we couldn't tell them what to do.
So recognizing context was incredibly important for you.
And also letting people do what they were best at.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Try to make everybody be good at speaking or good at writing or whatever. We had one person who, her name is Dalma, and she was fabulous at making little slips of paper with a daily slogan, like when we would have a governmental meeting. And they were always spot on. I can't even remember them, but, it'd be something like 5 states in your region are now, signing on to having a treaty. Where are you? That kind of thing.
Right.
And I am not exaggerating. It got to the point where when the governments would come in and see her standing at the door, they'd try to sneak in the back so they wouldn't get the slogan of the day.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Isn't that great?
Yeah, that's so good. She predating social media. I like it.
Yeah, she was awesome. And then, we had things where landmine survivors, for example, in Cambodia, did a signature campaign and walked around with pieces of paper and landmines and get monks and nuns and everybody else to sign. And then they did such a great job that we set up an event in the UN meeting room where Cambodian campaigners would come and give over the signatures and, log the numbers. I think we got up to 1 million from campaigns around the world.
Right.
But it was, spotlighting everybody.
Jody, I want to talk about hope a little bit and how you dealt with discouragement and so on. But just before we go there, because I think it's all of this is great and so connected. This is all work that you're doing pre-Ottawa Treaty. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because really, we're hoping that people who are listening have a bit of an understanding of where we've come from and where we are today. But we'll probably chat a little bit about that too. It's landmines again are in the headlines, unfortunately, for the wrong reasons. But can you talk a little bit about leading up to that 97 treaty, Lloyd Axworthy and so on, and how that played out?
One of the things that we thought about in the beginning is, how do we get governments to come together to even talk about it? And there was a treaty, I think it was the 1980 treaty. And it was short name is the Convention on Conventional Weapons. And it sought to restrict or ban weapons that could harm people.
Right.
Civilian people.
Civilians. Right.
And I think it was Article 2 was on landmines and other indiscriminate weapons, something like that. And then we looked it over and it said, after the treaty has been in force for 10 years, any one state that is party to the treaty can call for a meeting, of states to go over. And the French campaign got the French to call for a meeting. And that was the beginning of the annual meetings of states, parties to the Mine Ban Convention, when it became a convention. So once a year, there would be a big meeting, diplomatic meeting of representatives from different states who would come together and talk about it. And so that set up a platform. That's not the right word, but it gave us a space to be in the face of the governments. And that made a difference because we were allowed in the room, which was very unusual. And they had to listen to us. We were allowed to speak, et cetera, et cetera. But it was very clear that group of diplomats were not going to ban the weapon. Many wanted to, but the big boys, the US, Russia, were the two that stand out the most, but there were others, didn't want to ban them. And all they had to do is say no. You could have 100 countries in a room, 99 of them want to ban something, a weapon. And if one state says no, nothing happens. So we had started thinking about, okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to leave the UN and make this treaty happen? Because I could have 50 countries in my house negotiating a treaty, and if they sign it, it's a real treaty. It doesn't matter the building you're in. So we set up a plan for beginning to talk to governments that were in favor of a ban. And we met outside of the UN to discuss plans and thinking, et cetera. And then when this French-led meeting in the UN collapsed, Lloyd Axworthy said, well, let's go to Canada and have a meeting in like 6 months after we've had time to cool down and all that. And it was great. We went there and he told Goose and I that at the end of the 2 or 3 day meeting, Canada was going to announce and challenge the states in the room that they were going to create a mine ban treaty. And if they were the only ones in the room, they'd do a treaty and sign it and get others to sign it as they went along. That was so amazing. It was just really amazing. And that's what happened. When the real meeting collapsed, like 6 months later, we go to Canada and I can't remember, maybe there were 50 countries there as participants and maybe another 20 as observers in the campaign, of course, and the UN and ICRC, International Committee of the Red Cross. And of course, nothing was happening. It was just like, they'd picked up the diplomats from the UN and dropped them in Canada, and they were saying the same stuff. But we did work out some sort of timetable for trying to actually move something forward. Then Lloyd comes back to close the meeting, and he's, of course, standing at the podium, and he thanks everybody for coming. And he said, this is great, but, it's time to put the pedal to the metal, something like that. It's time to, really get...
Time to take this and move it forward. Yeah. Yeah.
And he said, and in that regard, Canada is challenging you all to come back within a year with a negotiated treaty, and we will sign it even if it's a handful of other nations. The crowd went wild. The U.S. went mental. They thought so much that nothing was happening that the head of delegation for the U.S. had already left, so he could go catch his plane and all that.
So they kind of thought this was just another meeting, no big deal, nothing's going to really come out of this, right? Just a group of people talking.
Yep. And boy, within that year, that treaty was negotiated. And then we had the signing conference in Canada, Ottawa. Can't remember how many signed at the beginning.
The number 122 rings a bell. That
sounds right.
Sounds about right. And I was just recently, just last year in November, was able to go to the Anti-Landmine Summit in Siem Reap and was thrilled to be there, worked alongside the Canadian Embassy and was able to meet lots of people, including ICBL and many many others. And I think there's about around 165
Probably with a
signatories.
couple less right now.
A couple less right now. And I do want to talk about that in relation to, and sadly, we're going to have to wrap up soon, but I want to talk about that in relation to hope. Like, you've been at this a long time, since you were 4, actually, by the sounds of it.
Oh, yeah.
taking on Dave in the schoolyard, which is, if you just are joining us now, by the way, you got to go back and listen to the whole interview, because we get a little bit of autobiography from Jody that's fun and fascinating all at the same time. So we've got Finland, we've got Poland, Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania saying they're going to step back, saying they're removing themselves from the convention for a variety of reasons. And for one reason. There you go.
Russia.
Because of Russia.
Yep.
And now they're going to say, Jody, of course, it's in self-defense, and our landmines aren't quite as bad as Russia's landmines, and we're going to create landmine maps and these types of things. Anyway, it's pretty discouraging to be here today. I mean, there's a lot wrapped up in that, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I'm trying to control myself so I don't.
So you don't start swearing and smashing things?
Yeah, well, I won't smash. I like my stuff.
You like your library.
I like my stuff, my library. I'm not going to rip up my books over Russia. It's not surprising.
Yeah.
If one thinks about it, steps back, not as an activist, but just think, if I'm on Russia's border and they've invaded, the first time they invaded Ukraine was what, 2014? Is that when they started, or was it 2012? I can't remember.
I'm not sure of the date, but a few years ago, for sure.
Invading the border areas and taking many, and then their full-fledged illegal invasion. And they have threatened other countries for wanting to join NATO, which to them is a threat, especially if it's a country on the border with Russia. And if I were a country on the border with Russia and they started threatening me, I'd be afraid.
Of course.
And if you look at the history of how Russia got up the nerve to just blatantly, illegally invade the country, it's because first, Chechnya, they took over Chechnya, nobody did anything. Georgia, same thing. They invaded and took part of their land. Nobody did anything. They intervened with Syria. Nobody did anything. If I'm somebody like Putin, I'm going to think, I could probably invade the Ukraine and get it back, especially when he has the delusions of grandeur of recreating the, gigantic machine of Russia and Soviet Union. So if he starts yapping I'm thinking about invading you if you do this or that or the other, I'd be afraid.
Mm-hmm.
And fear is one thing, but if I'm going to fight back, am I going to fight back with something that offers more harm to my own country than to my enemy? And landmines stay in the ground forever, especially once they started making them with plastic, etc., which doesn't biodegrade, if we remember. I wouldn't want to use landmines. Yes, they warn you, if an invading force comes up to the border and they step on mines, I start screaming, you're aware. But once they get through the mindfield's irrelevant. But the minefield stays there, and then anyone who steps on that mine, doesn't matter who it is.
Jody, did I hear you sort of say it's a deterrent, but not a very good one?
Correct.
Yeah. That's a fascinating insight in the sense that, okay, sure, it's going to help you from a self-defense perspective. Okay, let's go there, but it's temporary. Yeah. And it's not, is it really worth that risk and that reward for such a long, like a silent killer, as the title of the podcast is about? And that name's been used for years. I know that. So you don't see any argument that makes sense for landmines?
Unless I hate you so much, I'd like to be blown up.
Little sense of humor goes a long way. Yeah, sure.
But it's not a strategic weapon. It's not going to stop a war. If I remember correctly, there hasn't even been a battle won because of landmines. They're just a passive deterrent that blows up if somebody steps on them or picks them up. And then you leave a mess that you have to deal with.
I've worked in development for years, Jody, and spent a lot of time in Cambodia. As listeners of my little shameless self-plug here, listeners of my podcast, Face-to-Face,
self-plug. It's reality.
Will know that I've been doing this work for years. And I remember coming across a landmine field in Cambodia, I'm going to say early 2000s. And you know the red sign that I'm talking about. And, if you've been on any of the landmine clearing organizations or advocacy organizations, you know what I'm talking about, this red sign that basically says danger, landmine, stay away, basically.
Yep.
And I remember just kind of simply reflecting on the impact of long-term development, like infrastructure. How could you actually do anything really not knowing what was around you or what was underneath you and so on? And as you say, these things are around forever. I mean, they are the perpetual weapon, it seems. Anyway, I just remember being so struck by that, thinking, no wonder development is hard, and now
Yep.
let's add this footnote to the conversation and look how difficult it becomes.
I'll tell you a story too. It was after Yugoslavia had broken up, or
Right.
was in the process thereof, and they used landmines, of course, in different places.
Yes.
None of them were mapped, and the war ended, and whichever country it was trying to start mapping at least basic areas where mines were, not every mine. And they went from village to village that were involved in fighting in the particular country, and had meetings and, asked the men to please try to remember at least vaguely where the minefields were laid. And they could come to the office and, inform them. Nobody would say who it was, blah, blah, blah. And nobody spoke. A few weeks later, people were getting blown up.
Of course.
And the single cow of a family, thus obviously dealing a huge blow to their
Sure, of course.
family, etc. So a man shows up at the office and he said something to the effect of, I was at that meeting and heard you when you talked about the mines, and I did nothing. My son was out in the woods around there trying to collect wood to cook, and he stepped on a mine and he lost his leg. If I had spoken sooner, that would not have happened. So I'm here to try to help you however I can.
I mean, it's a horrible story.
Doesn't that blow you away?
It's mind-boggling. It really is. And there's so many metaphors to that too, about the steps and about not taking a step. I mean, it goes wide and deep, and it's glad you told that. Jody, as we get sort of closer here to wrapping up, and I wish we could keep this going, and maybe there'll be a part two. I hope there will be. Where do you think the treaties had its most impact? And
it's the whole process too. And let me see if I can remember.
It's not just the treaty. I like it.
Not just the treaty itself. When the Nobel Committee decided that the landmine campaign and myself would share the prize in 97, of course, they talked about the wonders of the campaign itself.
Of course.
But in terms of mobilizing mine clearance people to educate populations that were living near minefields, and et cetera, et cetera. And at the end, they said that, we had taken the idea of a landmine treaty and turned it into reality. And also, the method we used in the campaign itself served as a model for other people and organizations to work for peace.
It's amazing.
I loved that part because it's true.
Was that a comment about how the staff of one was able to build community around the cause?
It's an example of one.
Yeah, sure.
But other people have done,
Of course. Yeah.
Sure. It's the core thing for me is believing in the utility of working together.
Wow, it's so good.
Everybody brings their strength. And then
sure.
I didn't love everybody in the campaign. I think you could have guessed that.
Especially that colonel, or was it a general?
Oh, God, he was a colonel. Oh,
so just as we wrap, Jody, oh man, I have so many questions, and I'm just having such a great time with you here on the.
Yeah, you're fun, by the way.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. So, here we are laughing and smiling around such a horrific, difficult issue. The world is a challenging place right now, geopolitically.
It's horrible right now.
It's a horrible place right now. And it just seems like we just can't get out of that. I'm going to say 200 kilometer, as the Canadian here in the room, the 200 kilometer rut We're just kind of caught in that. How do young activists, how do people who are listening to this, who are stepping in, who are a part of organizations, sit on boards, are doing fundraising, maybe are actually doing the work on the ground of demining? How do you stay hopeful when you get out of bed in the morning?
I can only say what worked for me, right?
Sure.
I think in a lot of it was, I do like most of the landmine campaign people.
Right.
I could name a few that rubbed me the wrong way, but I don't gossip ever.
That'll be on part 2. We can, yeah.
I think it's the wonder of people coming together to work on an issue, and
Wow, that's
the ones
cool.
that really get it, know how to use what they're best at to contribute to the process, and not getting all torqued out if they can't speak. If they can't speak, it's because they can't speak. It's not because we didn't want them to speak. They were terrible for various reasons, Couldn't string a few sentences together to clearly say you need to do this. You don't need someone who stands up there for half an hour and at the end you still don't know what the hell they were talking about.
Right.
And it's working with people to maximize what they're good at and finding ways to let everybody participate so they feel part of the process.
It almost sounds to me like the answer is you're finding hope in others.
Others and all of us together.
All of you together. The power of one, but the power of the collective, of the community.
To be the power of the collective.
Yeah,
no one person changes the world, although Trump is certainly trying.
Yes.
Unfortunately for all of it, you could be a state, not you personally.
Right.
Right
Sure.
on the border of where I live, Vermont.
Yes, of course. We're neighbors.
Wouldn't that make you want to throw up to be a state under Trump? I use the throw up emoji an awful lot in my emails these days.
These days, yes, you've had to turn a corner or two from a. And what was your social media person way back? Was it Dalma?
I have no idea.
No, I'm teasing. The woman that was great at slogans. Yeah. Is it Dalma?
Dalma, D-A-L-M.
Yeah. We need her right now. I think we need to create a new slogan for this podcast. I think would
amazing. Oh, by the way,
it's so great, Jody.
She lives in Hungary. I have to say, she lives in Hungary.
She is
still working on stopping killer robots. She's working on landmines. She does, regional and national meetings with that guy who's running the country. By the way, Trump thinks he's marvelous, if you recall.
I do recall. Yeah,
she's fabulous.
Jody. It's been a real pleasure having you on the show, on this podcast, and we're going to do what we can to get not only this conversation out, but it is a 10-episode podcast. It's called Silent Killers, and you probably already know that if you've been listening in, and we do hope you'll share it with friends and family. But what a pleasure having you here chatting about such a challenging issue, and still you and I building a little bit of community here today, and I love that. So thank you so much for joining me here on the show.
I believe any problem in the world can be tackled if you talk to each other, make plans of action, and do them, and just respect the dignity of each person and how they contribute. It's not magic.
It's so good.
Caring.
It's just caring. Jody Williams, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
Well, there you have it. That was Jody Williams. And here on the first episode of Silent Killers, a podcast collaboration in partnership with Face to Face, a podcast that I've been a part of for many, many years, and the international campaign to ban landmines. And you can find out more about them at ICBLCMC.org. Make sure you sign up for the podcast, share it with family and friends. We would appreciate that. Stay tuned for our next episode next week. There's going to be 10 episodes altogether. It's a short series, and we really hope that you're going to step in with us. It was a fascinating conversation with Jody. Had a lot of fun with her as well, talking about a very serious issue. And I think the big takeaway for me is this idea of hope and activism, and the idea that there is a community in collaboration. This isn't just something we do. This isn't transactional. It truly is transformational, or at least it can be. And it can lead to some pretty incredible change. And we are in a difficult set of circumstances right now with what's happening. And we are going to have to continue to step in with our sleeves rolled up. Thanks for joining us here on Silent Killers. My name is David Peck.